So, do you remember at what point during the show you thought to yourself, hey, this show is actually going somewhere?
No. I don't think I ever thought that.
Really?
I don't think I ever had enough perspective to think about that. I think that I just kind of went along with the flow from the beginning and did what people told me to do, and I don't think I was conscious enough of the fact that it could not go. Like, I didn't know what the odds were. I didn't know that it was actually more likely that we wouldn't go than we would go. So, yeah.
Good. Good way to go into it. How did the X-Files change your life?
Well, let me see.
List the one thing that didn't change in your life because of the X-Files.
No, everything changed. I mean, I was out of work. I was on unemployment. I was living in an apartment. Actually, when it was picked up, I was living in somebody else's apartment. I had no possessions. I had no car. I had long, really scraggly, messy hair. I didn't have a daughter. I had never been married. Yeah.
It was there for your whole life. It was everything.
It was. It became. Yeah. I mean, it changed absolutely everything. I mean, from shooting in another country, all of a sudden having a home in another country and having a paycheck, let alone a consistent paycheck, everything changed.
Do you remember realizing at a point that you were famous? Or did that come at you slowly?
I think
like
that
sort of
came,
person by person?
I think the
recognizability.
The recognition of fame came slowly. I think it was necessary for it to come slowly, and I think that it helped that we were shooting in Vancouver. I think that if we had been down here, it would have been harder to make the transition with humility. That saying that I have humility, but it would have been, I think it would have been more challenging to keep my head on my shoulders and keep some semblance of balance if we had been doing it in Los Angeles.
How much did this show change you as an actress?
I think that I've learned so much about the craft of acting on this show. I mean, my experience when I began was so limited. I mean, I always felt like I had stuff inside that needed to get out, but how to get it out was not, I didn't have huge experience with that. I mean, I went to theater school in college. I did community plays. I did theater. I had, done a small film and an episode of a TV show, and that was really it. And when I showed up at the beginning, I knew absolutely nothing about lighting and marks and, monitoring oneself and scene structure. And I remember way at the beginning, I was living in a hotel room in Vancouver for the first 3 months, and the concept of shooting out of sequence, the scenes out of sequence, not chronologically, all of a sudden was like, wait a second, how do you do that? And I devised a way to write up charts, and I would do this chart of, in every scene, what information I knew before that, what I didn't know yet, so that I could refer to it. And I think ultimately, certainly in other projects, I may do that again when I need to, but to do that with every single script, I mean, at the beginning, I just needed that security, and that I couldn't fathom moving forward without knowing every little detail, and after a while, your body starts to remember. After a while, you get to just be able to flip a few pages back and go, okay, this is what we've done. Oh, we haven't shot that yet. I don't know this, and you start to trust your body's ability to remember that information. And at the beginning, I was so afraid in so many ways I didn't know how to work. I didn't know how to break down the script. And so I was learning everything all at once. And you see that on film. I mean, if I watch the early episodes, I see, over time, somebody who's starting to put the pieces together and figure out, oh, okay, it's better if I turn towards the light scene. It's your body starts to be able to stand back and see what the audience is seeing, and then monitor the performance based on that perspective, not just everything being about what I'm doing in this, you know what I mean? So it's interesting what you learn, and all of that was learning in the doing, as it is with anybody. But yeah, I mean, I really feel in a certain way that I did grow up on camera. It's funny because child actors have that experience of growing up on camera, and because I started in my 20s, at first I might not just jump to that conclusion, but when I really think about the fact that it was just under a third of my life, and I was still growing, and still, I mean, I was a baby, really, when I began, that did happen. I don't think that I had a clear, conscious thought about the chemistry until it started to be brought to my attention, by doing press and people saying, what about the chemistry between you and David? It was definitely there. It still is. I mean, there's something that can't be explained about it. It's there's no rhyme or reason. It's just there when we are together in front of the camera, and even, well, generally in front of the camera. It's just something that kind of clicks in, and for whatever reason, but thank God, I mean, some people have that together and some people don't, and I think it was in retrospect, it was a huge aspect of why we stuck together, of why the show continued. People would talk about it early on, and I would think, yeah, well, that's an aspect of it, but that's not, but it's a big aspect. It really is. And I don't think I realized that until it wasn't there anymore.
How different was it the last couple of seasons, doing the show largely without him and having two new co-stars?
It was different. It was, I mean, on the one hand, there were elements that were absolutely fantastic, and I love Robert and Annabeth, and they brought some really wonderful work and interesting characters to the show, and I think it was necessary at the time for the show to make that transition into something new and fresh, and I think they absolutely pulled it off. I mean, they've been working their buns off, and it shows. I think that two better actors couldn't have been chosen for these characters, and they really have taken the characters and made them, great human beings. And I think that's...
And there you have it.
And there you have it.
What was a high point for you in the X-Files? Was it the Emmy? Was it directing, writing? Is there a point that you reflect on as a high point?
Well, I think, you mentioned an award or awards in the high point, and I think honestly that at the time I didn't know what that meant, or I mean, not that it means something per se, but I think that I have always just been swept up in the forward motion of things, that it was kind of, my attitude towards it was like, yeah, okay, this is great, and it was kind of only after the fact. I keep talking about after the fact. I guess, what I'm saying is it takes me a while to process things. It takes me a while to really take in the nature of what is before me enough to appreciate it enough, or enough to really consider the profundity of these life experiences, and that is one example of of receiving awards and not clearly having perspective enough to understand the awesomeness of it on some degree, of people going, yeah, we like what you're doing, we support what you're doing, we think you're doing good work, to kind of go, wow, thank you, this is great. My reaction was, cool, all right. It wasn't big enough for the occasion, and I often have that reaction to things, and I don't know whether it's a survival mechanism, and just keeping me, if I was able to take it in, would I, internally combust? But I think in terms of high points, I definitely feel like writing and directing an episode was one of the greatest high points, in having subconsciously learned enough in the process of doing and doing and doing, that I could then step outside enough to be able to kind of do it myself, certainly with a great deal of help, but to do it myself and be in control, which is really what directing's all about. It's about just being in control of all the details. But it was an incredibly, creative and fulfilling and exciting and educational experience that was just, it was just so important in my life and in the big scheme of my life experience, that I'm so grateful that there were so many people who allowed me to do that, to let this, little girl, which is how I perceive myself, do this big thing on national television. That Chris actually said, okay, you write the script and yeah, maybe you can direct it. Really? You will? Gosh.
I'll do it.
Yeah. So it was awesome.
Do you walk away from the X-Files with a sense of pride, looking back on the work you've done?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not necessarily pride in the work. I mean, yes, pride in some of the work, but pride in the ability to stay with something for such a long time and to show up to the best of my ability. I mean, there are episodes where I'm just, schmacking the heck out of, and that was necessary at the time. I mean, there's only so many days a week that you can show up and be fully there. And you have to choose every once in a while to just kind of sit back and take a breather, and it shows. But you have to be able to go, it's okay once in a while.